about the
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Westerlin. I am actually not going to be in the experience today because I'm going to be leading a separate room. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. So one of the things that we do at Open Sky when we have an event like this is we have a support room. So if anybody needs any extra help or support or just needs some time to kind of process some of the things that maybe could be coming up in terms of the content, we have a space available. So as you can see, that is the Zoom link in the chat. So I'll be there. And I just wanted to make sure that people knew that it's a safe space and it's really just there in case that is something that people need. Before I move on, did anybody have any questions related to that? All right, well, I am going to be there in case anybody needs to join in. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. Awesome. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Karen. So we are going to get right into it, and I will introduce our first speaker. So Shira Diner is the Director of Associate Development and Recruitment at Todd & Weld LLP. Prior to her current position, she was a public defender with the Committee for Public Counsel Services, CPSC, for 17 years, most recently as a supervising attorney in the Criminal Defense Training Unit. In 2016, she was appointed by Governor Charlie Baker to the Massachusetts Sentencing Commission. She is a member of the Massachusetts Legislators' Bail Reform Special Commission. She serves on the board of the Massachusetts Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. She is an adjunct clinical professor of law at Suffolk University Law School. So she is quite the busy bee. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Shira.
Great, thank you. Can you guys hear me? And I'm going to be tag teaming my presentation with Shayla Mumbler. So hopefully she'll get her intro at some point. I want to try to share my screen here, if I can do that, because we've got a little bit of a PowerPoint. And let's see. All right, here we go. I think we're in business. So basically, we wanted to start off by giving everybody sort of a little bit of grounding in understanding of how racism shows up in the criminal legal system and sort of what the criminal legal system is made up of. And Shayla is going to be talking also about some recent studies that have been done to sort of document the problems that we anyone who's been involved with the system knows exist. So just to start out, this is probably not news to people, but there's all different kinds of racism, and the criminal legal system is a great example of what systemic racism looks like. And I will say, I could talk about this for hours, but the first time I realized that the system is not actually broken, but the system is doing exactly what it was intended to do, was a really big wake-up call for me. I had spent many, many years as a public defender trying to, fix the broken system and make it all better. And I at some point just realized that system was doing exactly what it was set out to do. So just to sort of ground what Shayla is going to be talking about, we could talk for hours about the different stages of a criminal case and sort of how they all play out. But these are a few we sort of want to focus on. These are places in the criminal legal system process where we think that racism and this structural racism shows up the most. So first is policing. Who gets stopped by the police? Who gets investigated? Who gets charged with what? Police have a tremendous amount of authority and power in that regard. Then there's the question about bail and detention. So while a case is pending, someone can either be held on bail or they can be released. And without going into the complexities of it all, I can tell you that people who are not white are significantly more likely to be held on bail or in some other way while their trial's pending. And there's both, the racism that goes into that, but also sort of the racism that's involved with the inequities in our economic system, because bail is really about money, and it shouldn't be, but it has that impact on people. Sentencing is another big place where racism comes up. We see there's so much of it there. Who gets sentenced, what they get sentenced to, the length of the sentence. I was watching an argument at the Supreme Judicial Court last week or this week, I think it was last week, about the question of life without parole. And I was floored by the statistic that 77 people serving life without parole in Massachusetts are Black. And, there's so many examples of that, but these are the places that we think this comes up the most. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shayla, and I can just click the slides for you if you want.
No, so you can keep it right there, Shara. You can go back to because I wanted to, Shara gave us a great outline of some of the things that I'd like to talk about with you all today. Just like Shara, I don't have the extent to the experience she has had as far as in the public sector, but I was a public defender for 5.5 years. So during my role there, I did have an opportunity to see a lot of the things that we've talked about and were ignored for a long time. Then data came out and we saw on paper. I had an opportunity to experience it with my clients. So I want to quickly talk about that. Before I go into it, because I love to have some type of interactiveness whenever I do presentations, I just want to pose one question to those who could put an answer in the chat. When you hear the phrase systemic racism, can you just tell me what comes to mind? Even if it's a specific example of where it could, show up, or if it's a word, if it's a phrase, if it's, okay, I see some chats coming in. Redlining, awesome. I'll just wait for a few more. Schools, hospitals, prisons, racial profiling, healthcare, fantastic. A longstanding inequitable system that is pervasive in our society. Crack versus cocaine penalties, yes. Unfairness, yeah. So all of these phrases, all of these words and ideas are exactly on point and kind of what I want to go into when we talk about first systemic racism and systems and what that means versus this idea of racism itself. And when we talk about race and justice, we're talking about the ways that discrimination, policing, prosecutions, incarceration practices, how all of those things are impacting Black communities. And, sometimes when you hear systemic or systematic racism, often you could wrongly interpret that as an accusation that everyone in the system is racist. But in fact, actually, it's actually the opposite of that. It means that we have systems and institutions that produce racially disparate outcomes, regardless of the intentions of people who work within them, right? Which is really important to understand and have at least a foundation in before trying to approach any type of work and change. And much of the criminal legal system was built, honed, firmly established during the Jim Crow era, right? So the idea that, some of those proclivities today are showing up shouldn't be surprising at all. And I just want to quickly go into some of the touch points in the criminal legal system that are up there on the PowerPoint. And we could start with policing. So policing, and I can provide you all with the data, the citations to a lot of the things that we'll be talking about. When I was at CPCS as a public defender, we did some research that was focused specifically on the criminal legal system and the disparities within race. So I can give you all that. And in the interest of time, I won't cite to every particular article or data. So excuse that, but I will provide you with it if you all want it. So with policing, Black people are disproportionately over-policed, and experience state and constitutional violations when compared to their white counterparts. And these are things that, if you've at some point worked in the system, if you have experiences with law enforcement, or maybe your family have, or if you have like any idea of what happens on the day-to-day basis to people of color in our communities, you would know that. But the great thing is things like the Harvard study now have showed us that these things are real. They've collected this data, and we'll talk a little bit about that study in a moment. But Black people particularly face disparate treatment because of their race. Comprehensive research has been done on this, not just within the Harvard study, but there's other articles that have collected data and shown that this is a thing, and it's true. According to data collected by even the Boston Police Department, 70% of people stopped by police officers through the department's FIO program, which is a field interrogation observations. And basically, that's like a fancy way of saying this was the way that they were able to get a glimpse of Boston Police's interactions with individuals. And when they looked at that data, they saw that even though they were Black residents, comprised less than 1/4 of the city's population. That taking a glimpse at the data, the amounts of times that they were stopped, searched, arrested, were the discrepancy and a disparity between white counterparts was just outstanding. The ACLU actually did a lot of study and follow up on this, and wrote a whole article that specifically showcased a lot of the racism that's in the Boston Police Department itself and the way they were interacting with communities of color. Specifically for interrogations, searches, and seizures, police officers stop, search, and arrest more Black and brown people than white people. And these are all things that are facts and data are supporting these assertions. In Massachusetts, a report on the Boston Police Department's civilian encounters between 2007 and 2010 showed that despite making up only 24% of Boston's population, Black people were subject to 63% of reported encounters with Boston police officers who were interrogated, stopped, frisked, and searched. And that same study, Latinx people, despite making up only 12% of Boston's population, were subject to approximately 18% of such encounters. Neighborhoods with Black and Latinx residents were targeted and FIO'd even after accounting for crime rates. So not only is this data, was this data gathered through like ACLU and other organizations, agencies, but also this is BPD's own data. When it comes to motor vehicle stops, a study of Boston Police Department's traffic stops found that Black and Latinx drivers were more than twice as likely as white drivers to have their cars searched as part of a traffic stop. So, that's showing that under the same exact circumstances, other than the way a person looks, that they were stopped, people of color being stopped or were being stopped at twice the rate of white counterparts. So I want to turn to bail and talk about bail and how it affects communities of color in two particular ways. One, and I know I got switched to the American Bar Association, but I'll make it all connect. So when we talk about bail, and Shara Diner is actually the queen of bail. She was part of a Brangen case, which I know a lot of you you're not law students or lawyers, but basically there was a major case that reinforced the idea that, when it comes to setting bail, a judge should take into account somebody's ability to post bail, because the purpose of bail is to make sure that somebody just appears at the next day. It's not to look at the offense only, or look at the person before you only and say, I'm gonna give you this high bail that makes no sense at all. You should be taking into account what that person could afford. So bail is specifically important to communities of color because the data suggests that people of color get higher bails than white counterparts. And we have fewer resources. So in Black communities, brown communities, the data supports that in Massachusetts, when you look at the ability to afford bail, there's less likelihood that maybe a person of color could afford, say, a $500 bail or $1,000 bail. And that's important because, you know, if you can't afford bail, then you're just going to be held because you can't afford bail. So then it's just this endless cycle of, you know, I'm not showing favoritism, or if I'm not being quote unquote, they say, racist and giving you a $500 bail because I would give somebody who's white in front of me, and this is the judge maybe thinking a $500 bail. No, actually, you should be thinking about somebody's race, because that person might not be able to afford that $500 bail as a white counterpart. So guess what? They're held on bail for a longer period of time. They're held on bail. So that means that their case either can't resolve or they're unlikely to want to litigate and go to trial, because now they're held simply because they can't afford to post a bail. I'm trying to quickly move through this because I know you don't have that much time. So according to the Harvard report, Black people are 2/10 less likely to be able to post bail immediately at arraignment, and also slightly less likely to be able to post bail at all. And again, going back to that question of, you know, well, why does this matter? It matters because if somebody is innocent and didn't commit a crime, if they're held on bail, and the only thing between walking out of a cell and, you know, being free or saying, hey, I did something I didn't do, you know, oftentimes people will say, you know what, I will just plead to a crime that I just did not commit because I've been held for, say, 2 months. And if I just do time served, then I can just leave and go home to my family today, which is incredibly unfair. And it impacts communities of color much more than it does our white counterparts. We also see, and the Harvard study also goes into this idea that race and bias doesn't only show up in bail and detention, but also if a charge even reaches an indictment. And I see we are out of time. All right, so, okay, so we're out of time, and I just want to quickly go over a few bullets of like how we can impact and make a change. One thing that we can all do or a few things that we can all do to impact the system and make a change would be to make sure that we do everything we can to eliminate racial bias and economic bias. And that could be, you know, who you're voting for to go into certain seats. It could show up in, you know, during jury selection when you encounter a set of facts, to remember that bias can affect the way maybe you view a case and maybe the way the prosecutor viewed the case. It's the idea of doing everything that we can to end things like mass incarceration, where we see Black people make up a small amount of the population, yet have one of the largest the largest percentages who are held in our prisons, and just making sure we're all vocal and do everything that we can to see these things change, because we are all in it together. And I think that is my time.
I want to say one last thing, and I promise I'll shut up. You know, defense attorneys, along with everyone else who works in the system, are all to blame for sort of for this, you know, racism that still exists. And it's something that Shayla and I are working very hard on to try and address sort of within our community of defense lawyers. I've got lots of information on pending legislation, but I'll save that for the question and answer time if there's any time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shira and Shayla. I definitely believe you after that presentation in being able to talk about this for hours. You guys have a wealth of knowledge, but we will transition to the next speakers. So next up, we have Sashi James and Mallory Hanera. Sashi James is the director of Reimagining Communities for Families for Justice as Healing and the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She is a daughter of formerly incarcerated parents, and because of her experience, she understands the trauma endured when a parent is separated from their child because of incarceration. She launched the first basic income guaranteed program led by formerly incarcerated women. She advocates for the use of clemency on the state and federal level and has worked on the National Council's 100 Women, 100 Day campaign, encouraging the immediate release of women who are elderly, survived, and punished long-timers. Her most important role is as the mother of Katori Ray James, and she is the daughter of John and Andrea James. Welcome, Sashi. And she is also here with Mallory. Mallory Hanera is the Executive Director of Families for Justice as Healing, an abolitionist organization based in Massachusetts and a proud member of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, with a mission to end the incarceration of women and girls. Mallory came to Family for Justice as Healing while on probation. She supported the statewide campaign led by formerly incarcerated mothers and daughters of incarcerated parents from 2015 to 2018 to make Massachusetts the first state in the country to pass primary caretakers, which is an alternative community-based sentencing for moms and caretakers of children. She has over 17 years of community and abolitionist organizing experience. She is the mom of twin toddler boys. Welcome to you both. So I think we want to use this time to have you just talk more about the work that you do and your organization. So happy to hand the mic off to the both of you.
Of
Thank
course
you
we would.
for having us.
Of course we would unmute at the same time. Go ahead, Melanie.
We're really happy to be here. Again, my name is Mallory, and I'm proud to be here with my co-director, Sashi. So, Families for Justice as Healing was founded by my boss and mentor and Sashi's mom, Andrea James, in Danbury Federal Correctional Institute. So inside of prison with the women that she was incarcerated with in 2010. And at that time, there was a national conversation that was going on around criminal legal reform. Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, had just come out, and there was this national conversation about acknowledging or beginning to acknowledge, in some ways acknowledging, talking about changes that need to happen, but women were entirely left out of that conversation, in particular Black women. So the women that founded Families for Justice as Healing from the prison yard made a commitment to bring the voices of the most directly affected women to the table, and have been doing that ever since. Also made a commitment to fight to free women, and that mission continues. So our mission has been from the prison yard until now, to end the incarceration of women and girls. We continue to be led by incarcerated women, formerly incarcerated women. So the sisters that were incarcerated at Danbury are still the leadership circle of the National Council, as well as directly affected women, which includes children of incarcerated parents. So Sasha, I can pass it over to you if you want to get started talking about our work and the buckets of our work.
Sure. So we work from three buckets of work. One is policy. And last year, as Mallory mentioned, we passed the primary caretaker, and I just wanted to shout out the folks that were on the call that helped us support us get that bill over the mark. And we also added an extension this session. But last year, there's a current process to build a new $50 million women's prison and also a $20 million youth prison. And so we wrote a prison and jail moratorium bill, which will put a pause on that construction. And last year, because of the people, because there's nothing stronger than the power of the people, we got that bill passed, and Governor Baker vetoed that bill. So we're back asking Governor Healy to address the harms that Governor Baker did by vetoing that bill. Although the people of Massachusetts spoke and said we don't need a new women's prison, and we definitely don't need a new youth jail. So we're asking to have that that bill passed, the prison and jail moratorium bill. We also have the medical bill, elderly bill, and a drug decriminalization bill and sex decrim bill, and the primary caretakers. Those, we believe that if we really address all of those bills as our rack of policies, that we can significantly decarcerate women and girls in Massachusetts and across the country as we build out the model of what different looks like. Our next infrastructure of the rack of that we work from is the Free Her campaign, which I'm really happy that we have launched our Free Her campaign in the New England states. So we have a campaign office in Vermont, we have a campaign office in Connecticut. We have folks that work in New Hampshire, folks that work in Maine, and we're really implementing those bills in those states. Like in Maine, we're leading the drug decrim bill because that's one of the main avenues that people are incarcerated in Maine. In Vermont, there's a proposal to build 4 new prisons. So we're working on the primary caretaker bill and the moratorium bill, but just getting on the ground to figure out what people need so that way we can get to our goal of ending incarceration of women and girls. And I'm just brushing through this quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time, but our most important layer of work that we believe not only creates a safe space for women that we're advocating to come home, whether it is through clemency, and yes, we are calling on the governor to also use her clemency power, because clemency is a major avenue for our women that are serving life and long timers and sick. And there is a woman in Framingham right now who has dementia who could really benefit from clemency. But in addition to all of those beautiful things, we're creating, and this is from years of being on the ground. Yeah, I know my mom, I'm sure, Andrea James, who is always screaming at people and telling people we can do better, because we can do better. And that's reimagining communities. Through the work of just listening to the people, we created Reimagining Communities, which is about saturating communities that are over incarcerated and under resourced. And we actually have the model being built out right here in Massachusetts. We carved out 22 blocks that sit right in the most incarcerated corridor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is on Humboldt Ave. And so we have a hydroponic farm that just landed there, which will be giving community members free vegetables and then also teaching them how to grow their own vegetables, and then hiring people to operate the farm because I can't be the lead on that. I do not have a green thumb. But then we also have basic income, where we give women that are in the community basic income guarantee. And then we also we don't have 2 women currently incarcerated because shout out to the work of movement lawyers and the folks on the ground advocating and screaming, but we are the first organization to give currently incarcerated women basic income, so that way when they come home, they have a cushion to come home to, which we still have sisters that are in the federal prison that receives basic income. But the 2 women that were incarcerated in Massachusetts, they came home. Shout out to Miss Angie, who is home, and New Beginnings Reentry Services. And so we're really excited about that. And then we also have a housing program, because one of the #1 reasons why women end up incarcerated in the first place is because of lack of access to affordable housing. And so when you break that down, 82% of those women are actually mothers. And so now we're saying that children don't have access to affordable housing. And as a mother myself, I have a 4-year-old who may come running in here at any time. We will do the most vulnerable to provide for our children. And we, in a state where we spend $162,000 to incarcerate a woman, if the reason why a woman is incarcerated is because of lack of access to housing, we should be figuring out how we can funnel those investments to women, so that way they don't have to cause harm, and they can actually become a healthy, dignified person, or healthy, thriving person, so they can create a healthy, thriving community. And so I'll pause there. I know I said a lot, and take it back to Mal. Sorry.
Thank you for that incredible overview. We get asked all the time, like, what else besides incarceration? And Sashi's like leading that visionary work about what we say creating what different looks like, recognizing that alternatives to incarceration and stopping the flow of people into jail and prison in the first place is really about meeting people's basic needs and offering opportunities for healing. So it's exciting that work is happening, and also that work is threatened by, the state's plan to build this $50 million women's prison. So just to reemphasize, if you haven't heard, Massachusetts has the lowest incarcerated population in the United States, and still one of the highest incarcerated populations on earth. So we absolutely can and must do better. And even at a point with a 30-year low in the incarcerated population in the Department of Correction, which is our state prison, the state is still threatening to build a $50 million women's prison for less than 200 women. And so whether we talk about what Sashi mentioned, the annual cost, $162,000 per year per woman at MCI Framingham, or $50 million divided by 200 women, women deserve better than prison. People deserve better than prison. What else is possible? And now is that moment for us to really stop and say, what else can we do instead? So instead of shovels in the ground, first answer to everything is always jail and prison construction. We have these solutions. We know there's legal pathways home. Sashi mentioned some of them, and we know that there's community-led solutions, particularly solutions led by directly affected folks that can stop people from going in on the front end. And in the spirit of the event too, we also recognize that the criminal legal system is a cornerstone of white supremacy, right? It's upholding oppression. It's upholding a social order, which continues to deprive people of what they need to live. We also see rampant sexism, and that our approach is really trying to do something different rather than continuing to funnel resources again for the next generation and the next generation into a system that's causing absolutely nothing but further harm. So we're building a coalition of people led by directly affected women, led by formerly incarcerated Black women, and supported by people from all walks of life all across the state who believe that in a state that's rich with resources, that we could really be doing something different. And we should. And again, now there's the new Healy administration, but we're worried that we're going to see more of the same because Governor Healy has decided not to replace the leadership at the Department of Correction, not to replace the leadership at the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security that oversees the Department of Correction, that oversees the parole board, that oversees the sheriffs. And we know the harm that's been happening. We know the mistreatment and abuse of our people. We know the rampant sexual violence against women in prison. And she has decided that everything is fine. And so we're really concerned and really asking her to meet with formerly incarcerated women. If she's going to be a governor for everybody, that has to include incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. So we just dropped off a letter on Thursday. Again, another request to meet with her. We have a series of demands, and we're really asking you to take some easy online action today. You can leave her a voicemail before the end of Valentine's Day, and let her know that you support this vision of moving forward without building a brand new women's prison, exploring bringing women home. So really excited about all of that work, and really excited about our unending commitment to fight for the freedom of individual women, which we're continuing to do. So the only way that we can close Framingham forever without rebuilding or replacing it is making sure that we're bringing women home. So Sasha, I can pass it back to you. I don't know if you want to mention, you speak so beautifully. It's on Valentine's Day. It's Black History Month and lifting up the generations long legacy of abolition and the freedom fighters that we stand on the shoulders of. You also talk really beautifully about addressing actual harm, right? The harm that this system has caused for generations, the harm that people are doing to each other, and that this current system isn't offering any of that. It's not offering healing for any of that. Do you want to speak on that?
Oh, it says we need to wrap up, and that's fine. Yeah, I mean, we're creating an infrastructure very briefly, but we're creating an infrastructure, and this is why we uplift reimagining communities as that infrastructure, because prisons and jails and police, the gang unit, the cameras on our corner, the police from the security buildings, like all of those interactions cause further harm. Incarceration causes further harm. I mean, we're on the call with Sean Ellis, and we follow the leadership of our formerly incarcerated folks. Our whole team is formerly incarcerated. My mom is formerly incarcerated. My dad was formerly incarcerated. And so this is just a generation of harm that is continuing. And so we're at a space where we cannot no longer keep repairing and putting band-aids over the harm that the system is causing, but we need to dismantle the entire system and rebuild a system that works for all people and also provides and supports the commitment and vision of creating healthy, thriving people that can go on and create healthy, thriving communities. And so we are giving the people in our communities that are over incarcerated and under resourced the tools that they need and the training that we need and, you know, the resources they need. And on Valentine's Day, I'm going to say the hugs and love that they need. So that way they can go off and pass it on. And I told you my daughter was coming. So that's my time to tap out.
Great. Thanks to both of you. Really could hear and sense the passion as you both spoke, and love the continuous reminders of the fact that people who have that lived experience really need to be the main voices when it comes to dismantling these systems and rebuilding them. So moving on to our next speaker, we have Janasia, I'm so sorry, Janasia Williams Thompson. She's a program manager / group facilitator for Sisters Unchained. Janasia first joined Sisters Unchained in 2014 and worked her way up from a participant to a leader. Congratulations. She currently attends UMass Lowell. So Janasia, I'll give you the stage to talk about your work.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And I just want to give applause to everybody that spoke before me. Y'all did beautifully. Mallory and Shashi, you know, I love y'all. I am going to share now my presentation that I put together for you all.
Janasia, you muted yourself.
I said I've been a program manager for about 2 years at Sisters Unchained, and now I'm trying to get back to the screen share. But overall, Sisters Unchained has been a very big part of my life. I got into Sisters Unchained because my father was formerly
You're muted again, Janasia.
to unmute myself and also share screen because it keeps muting me every time I share screen.
There, you're good now.
Are you able to speak to the slides even if they're not shared?
Or maybe you can drop you want to email it and maybe we can share it or something while you speak.
You're muted again.
Okay, so I'll just speak over while I go through my slides. So basically, Sisters Unchained about us, we are a prison abolitionist nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to supporting young women and girls with incarcerated family or formerly incarcerated parents. And we also are a refuge space for young women of color, where they can come and focus on loving themselves and just loving their communities and loving where they come from. Because a big thing of growing up as a woman of color in Boston is just feeling so underdeserved because Boston has been so gentrified. So sometimes you feel so out of place while being there. So we want to make sure that the girls have their own identity and are able to express their identity, as long as with them having incarcerated parents as well, we want to make them feel like that doesn't define them all the way through, but also learning how to work with that identity as well and learning how to turn that negative into a positive. So for basically our brand, we pride ourselves on serving the young woman, and now we've been working with older women as well currently, and we've been building a relationship with formerly incarcerated women at New Beginnings Reentry Services. So one of the things that we've been doing very recently, a couple months ago, for a couple of months, we had the girls go to the reentry house and just build connections with the woman so they can both learn. So the older generation can learn from the younger generation, and the younger generation can get that advice from the older woman, and probably also get some insight to how their parents felt when they were also incarcerated. So we feel like that's a really big thing for us. We really want form of understanding for everybody. And some of the main things that we do within Sisters Unchained is Rides for Families, the Cocoon Collective, and our summer intensive. For Rides for Families, we mainly focus and facilitate rides for like all kids and like women who have like incarcerated family members or loved ones in Massachusetts. So basically what that is we make sure that they can have rides on special holidays like today to go see their family members that are incarcerated that might be put out somewhere a lot farther than where their actual family stays. So that's very important. The Cocoon Collective is something that we do weekly with the girls that's going to be starting up again next month, where I host Zoom sessions and we just do regular check-ins. And basically I just see how they're doing. I see if they need any support in any other aspects because I am in college. So I do give support to the young girls for applying to colleges and just navigating like the college life and just giving them advice on different things that they might need, whether it's with school or their personal life. And the summer intensive is one of my favorite parts of Sister Unchained because that's when I first got involved. And this was the first actual thing we had where we have a summer program and the girls do get paid. And they get paid to learn about like the prison industrial complex. They get paid to learn about the prison system in general. They get paid to learn about different types of forms of healing and spirituality, different things that they could just tap in to take care of themselves and also educate themselves. And so we have like a couple of years of like different projects that we've done because we started doing these intensive projects in around 2016. And in 2016, we had a project where our girls decided to give back food, and I was also a part of this. We decided to give back food to the homeless in different places like around Boston, but it was mainly focused in downtown Boston because we noticed that when we, as like teenagers, would go to downtown, we would see like a lot of houseless people, and we just wanted to make sure that we're spreading and giving back food. So that was in 2016. And then in 2017, this was more of an artistic take that we did. We had something where we created vision boxes for the visions that we had for our city. And we placed them in different parts of the city to where people could see and look at the different vision boxes. And they just basically were intrigued. And it's like different things and different ideas that people can do to incorporate into their communities. And in 2018, we had a quilt project where everybody made their own specific piece of fabric art that related to them with Black culture and like Black issues. So some of our girls did things like Black liberation and Black empowerment, just cute things like that. I made something on gun violence and we all like sewed it together and created this big art quilt. And it was just like an impactful version of like how different types of art can come together and tell a story. And in 2019, we had something again with wanting to spread like the beauty and like the art of like just Black women and women of color in general. So the girls had created a list and we walked around different parts of Cambridge and Boston and asked women for their consent on if we could record videos and ask them questions. And we gave them like little self-care gifts after. And we had this like little panel thing that we had them take pictures with. And just asking them questions like, what does beauty mean to you? Like, what does beauty look like to you? What makes you feel beautiful? Just in a way, spreading love throughout their community. And in 2020, we had an art project where we had them paint different projects and different things about things that they were really passionate about. So some of them did things with like Black beauty, Black oppression, just different colors and all these different things. And we also had like this thing because we're more modern and a lot younger girls. So they're really interested in social media. So we set up this Instagram live where we reached out and just had different people come and watch our live and where we talked about different topics, whether it was about like financial oppression, whether it was about oppression in schools. It was just different topics that they were really interested in, did research on. And we also had another art project the next year where they just had like, it was more of like art healing therapy that we focused on. And our most recent project was the intergenerational project that we had with New Beginnings Reentry Service, where that's when we first introduced the girls to the women that were formerly incarcerated. And the bonds that they built were so beautiful, just seeing how the women were able to interact and ask the girls questions on like how they can better their relationships with like their children that they have, and like getting that insight, and then the girls getting insight on how they can better the relationship with their parents, and just making sure that that everybody is heard and understood, and not like one is teaching another, but everybody's learning from each other. We want to make sure that everything is community based and that there are no hierarchies, so everybody feels equal. And some recent collaborations and speakers that we've had is Transformational Prison Project, which is just thank you. It's just a project with this man named Armand. He's was incarcerated for about 20 years and just recently was released a year ago. And he just came and spoke about his experience with incarceration and how it affected him and everything. And so we really like when other groups and programs come in and give their perspective and tell their stories, because it shows the girls like there's so much more outside in the world and so many other things you could connect with. So we just want to make sure that they're well-rounded in education and understand, like, you know, like you can put yourself in the work, but you also need to learn how to take care of yourself at the same time. And that is my presentation. I'll put our email inside the chat and our website.
Thank you so much, Shanasia.
No problem.
Love that within your projects, you talked a lot about like Black beauty, Black joy, celebration. I think oftentimes, especially during Black History Month, we really focus on the pain, but celebrating our history, celebrating who we are should be a celebration. And I think it's important, especially during this month, for Black people in particular to choose joy, to choose laughter, to choose fun. And I'm happy you're providing outlets for people to be able to do that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so we're actually going to have 3 speakers join in this next segment. I know we had Mallory talk about her lived experience. So tied to that, we have 2 other speakers who were formerly incarcerated that will speak to their lived experience. And because of Patty's expertise, she will be sort of facilitating this part of the conversation. So I'll start by reading Patty's bio and then Sean Ellis's, and I believe Patty will introduce William. So Patty DeJunias, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is a criminal defense and civil rights attorney in Boston, specializing in prison-related cases. In 2020, she received the Lawyer of the Year award for her work in a case where prison officials beat over 100 men and locked out attorneys for 3 weeks. She is a member of the Massachusetts Bar Association Clemency Task Force and has been working for the last 3 years to make commutation a meaningful remedy for correcting racial injustices in the criminal legal system. So I'm also, as someone who's a racial justice advocate, I'm also learning a lot. And one of the things that I'm taking away is the use of criminal legal system as opposed to criminal justice system. So thank you. We also have here Sean Ellis. Sean Ellis is an exoneree and motivational speaker from New England. At the age of 19, Sean was arrested for the murder of a police officer and was wrongfully convicted at his 3rd trial, only after 2 juries could not reach a unanimous verdict. He was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. Significant police corruption and misconduct, including witness coercion and evidence tampering, as well as misleading forensic evidence, led to Sean's wrongful conviction. Sean was exonerated in 2018 after spending nearly 22 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And his story is now the subject of the Netflix docuseries Trial For. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you guys watch it. Today, Sean is a fierce advocate for reforms to the criminal legal system and is frequently invited to speak and spread awareness about wrongful convictions throughout New England. In 2020, he co-founded the Exoneree Network, a peer-led program funded by the New England Innocence Project to support the practical, emotional, and spiritual reentry needs of exonerees as they process the trauma of long-term incarceration and work to rebuild their lives in freedom. So I'll pass it to you, Patty, to lead this part of the conversation.
Hi, it's a real pleasure to be here. First, I'm going to introduce William Allen, and then I'm going to ask both William and Sean some questions. So William Allen is one of my favorite people on the planet. He was a client of mine for 10 years. He's no longer a client of mine because he's home. He spent 28 years in prison for a murder that he did not personally commit. He had agreed to commit an armed robbery, dumbest decision of his life, with his childhood best friend. And while William was in another room, his best friend stabbed and killed a drug dealer whose apartment they had decided to rob. William had no idea. He had no intent to kill. He had absolutely nothing to do with it. And that was never disputed. The Commonwealth and the prosecution never claimed otherwise. But it didn't matter. Didn't matter because there's a doctrine called the felony murder doctrine. And under that law, which does not apply anymore after 2017, but was not made retroactive. So William was convicted of first-degree murder because he decided to go to trial rather than take a plea for second-degree murder. And because the death occurred during the commission of an armed robbery, he's automatically guilty of first-degree murder. He confessed to the armed robbery to the police and at trial, so his conviction was guaranteed. So he had three ways of getting out. He had to win his appeal, he had to win a motion for a new trial, or he could have a sentence commuted. And commuted means shortened. The last time that a governor commuted a sentence of someone serving life without parole was 25 years ago. But last year, William and another gentleman named Tom Kuntz convinced Governor Baker to commute their sentences, and they're both home now doing really great. So I'm going to start by asking William about the commutation process. What was it? What did it take to get to the point where you are right now, which is home? What was the commutation process like for you?
It was stressful, and it literally took a village. You know, because when we first started, you know, you had doors slammed in our faces, where, you know, people that was doing it for years, you know, wasn't giving us hope. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And the persistency of my attorneys and the supporters, you know, y'all told my story, and here I am today. It was a journey, a stressful journey.
So tell us who was on your legal team and a little bit about your supporters and the organizations that you had behind you, because I think it's really important for people to understand what it took for William to go home.
Well, it started with one man that I met, you know, in '94 in Plymouth, you know, who knew Alan Tefenkjian, and, you know, Tefenkjian came to see me. Then he went back to his office and said, we got to help this guy. And that's where Christine McDonald came in. And then Patty, you know, then Chris was like, we need Patty to do the closed courtroom. And as I don't know if y'all know, but the closed courtroom got shut down. And Chris was like, so what can we do, Patty? What's the next thing we do? Well, there's a thing called commutation, you know, but not many people, the last time it was done in '97. And from there, you know, they've been knocking on doors, doing everything, and everybody been gunning us down. But then the support of the community, you know, it takes like I said, it takes a village. It was a community. You know, I had the New England Patriots, I had MCAN, I had BIC, and Second Chance Justice was developed. And we did, you know, peaceful rallies to where, you know, Governor Baker had no choice but to make a decision on if he wanted his political career to continue to go well, or he want to get slandered for not letting the guys that actually did the work in order to get out.
And so you said you did the work to get out. Can you just give us an overview of what kind of work you did while you were living in prison to be able to go home?
Yes, well, first myself by getting into many programs, and programs is the key. It's like you can't build a house without tools. So programs is like tools because it gives you the confidence and it shows how to love yourself. And before you could help anyone else, you have to work on yourself. And, you know, the key is program, and help those that, you know, that's not in your situation as far as doing life, but have an opportunity to go home and be that mentor to them. So be a citizen within prison, because if you could be a citizen in prison, you could definitely be a citizen in society.
And I'm just going to throw in a statistic. Only 15% of the men and women who live in Massachusetts prisons are enrolled in programs. And it's not because they don't want to be involved in programs and education. It's because they're not allowed to, or the programs are just not available. So our prison system doesn't really rehabilitate very many people. William is very unique in that he was very well liked by prison staff and the prison administration, which he's probably the only one who have those types of relationships. I want to flip over to Sean. And Sean is involved in a lot of activism right now, which is exciting, and innocence work. But I want to talk to him and ask you, Sean, about the criminalization of Black people. Just by virtue of being Black. What have you seen in terms of how prisons play into Black resistance and kind of the movement to make change?
Just to start, is for me, it's like the criminalization of Black people. And when I often speak, I always bring in my ancestors through slavery, because I believe that what happened to me and others in my situation specifically, but in a more general sense, what happens with men and women that are put in prison, we're relegated, whether innocent or not, we're relegated by law to a position of a slave. It says it in the 13th Amendment. And so when I look at the disproportionate numbers of Black and brown people who are in prison, Black and brown exonerees, I can't help but make the connection with the fact that my ancestors, in trying to find freedom and escape from plantations, but brought back for no other reason than the color of their skin, is to modernize that now. Is the people like myself and those who look like me, and our experience with the criminal legal system is pretty consistent what it has been since our introduction into this country. And so when Shira said earlier that the criminal legal system is working the way that it's intended to work, is because of the criminalization of Black and brown people, not just now, but through our history all the way up until now.
And I want to talk to you about what prison life is like. You know, we see somewhat of it being depicted on television and movies. But Sean, why don't you tell me about what the real life conditions were like that you lived under for 22 years?
I mean, just to start with just bare necessity and having to ask for some paper toilet, some toilet paper, to use the bathroom, and having a correctional officer have just, depending on what his or her mood may be, have the ability to tell you, yes, I'll give you some more, or no, wait until the next shift. Like that does something to somebody psychologically. That begins to weigh in on one's humanity. when you go into the visiting room and you're visiting with a loved one, whether it's a mother, whether it's a cousin, sister, brother, whether it's a wife, and you're having a good time, but the minute that you leave back to go back into the institution, you're forced to strip search. That's after being under surveillance for the whole time that you've been on a visit. Like that does something to one's humanity. It's dehumanizing. You know, when one is punished on one side of an institution because a fight happens on another side of the institution that has no relation to you whatsoever, like that does something to you, especially when you have to get to the law library to work on your case, or you're not able to get adequate dental care. If you have a cavity, instead of filling a cavity, they just want to pull your tooth. Not because the tooth suffered a lot of decay and trauma, but just because they don't want to go through the aggravation and the cost of giving you the type of health care that's definitely needed. And I can continue to go on, but.
So this question is for both William and Sean. And can you tell me about the brutality that you witnessed while you were in prison, and especially brutality committed by prison staff? So William, you want to answer first? Nope. I think we might have lost William.
No, I'm here.
Okay, so William, can you tell us a little bit about the brutality that you saw around you in the various prisons that you lived in? And specifically, I'm asking about misconduct by staff.
Yeah, personally, I witnessed, staff beat people up and they write a ticket and blame the con for doing something. They're like, oh, he hit me, or he did this. I seen like when guys walk through the child line, I seen a staff throw their food on the ground and blame the inmate for dropping their food, and they give him a ticket and send him to the hole. I seen because they would rather feed the pigs, the slaughterhouse, than to feed the guys that are truly hungry. They give you like a small portion, to like dinner, for example. They give you like a small portion and they expect you to, go through the night without being hungry. So guys used to put on different clothes, and when they go through the line, they would go out, they would go in the hallway, take their clothes off, and go right through and go back. You know what I mean? But if they get caught, they'll wrestle them down like they committed a murder or something. So it's that bad in prison, and it's not a good place to be.
And Sean, how about your experiences, whether you were the victim of it or what you witnessed, and how it affects people, even the ones who have not been assaulted?
My first experience with violence in prison kind of came. It was prisoner on prisoner violence, and it's when I first got to Walpole, and a fight had broke out, and the CO ran out of the block, like he had ran out of the unit, until the rest of the COs came, and at that point I realized that I wasn't nowhere safe. That the people that were supposed to be like the guards of the area were running out. And then the other thing is when I was in segregation at one point, and there was a guy a couple of cells down that the SEALs ended up tear gassing and opening his cell door and running in his cell with a shield and maybe about 15 or 20 guards, but there was they started beating on the individual. The individual ended up filing a lawsuit for the brutality, and thankfully for him, it's like the SEALs were made to be held accountable. But there's a lot of God to SEAL brutality that takes place, and it's covered up a couple of different means. One is when it happens, the man or the woman is put in segregation and not given access to a phone call. Okay, and so without access to a phone call, there's no way for you to get the SOS for help out. Okay, and then in terms of letters going in and letters coming out, that's controlled by prison staff. And so if you've been assaulted, right, there's really no way for you to get an SOS out except for an attorney. And oftentimes the attorney doesn't know until the person gains access to a phone. So it's like when you speak about the conditions like inside a prison and brutality, it isn't just physical, there's psychological and emotional brutality that takes place there as well.
And so luckily, because of the lawsuit we filed in 2020 after the attorneys were locked out, people in the hole who are put in restrictive housing because of an assault or any really reason, they are now allowed a minimum of 2 legal phone calls per week and 2 family phone calls per week. There are still problems with certain places, like there's a punitive hole where you go if you've been convicted of a serious offense. And usually the people that are beaten up by guards are charged with very serious offenses, and they end up in this place. They're not allowed to have any private attorney calls. They listen in, they record. And so when you're in that unit and something bad is happening, which it happens every day, you can't call your attorney and say, hey, this is going on, can you help me? Because they find out about it and they punish you for it. And so
Patty, if and I have to and I need to make the connection, right? Between, because oftentimes we get into Black History Month and there's pockets that kind of say, well, that happened a long time ago, it happened years ago, it's irrelevant. But in the same way that my ancestors did not have means of redress for the injustice that was taking place, when one's in prison encountering that sort of situation, there is no means of redress. The same way that Dred Scott was told that the Black man has no rights, the white man's bound to respect. Like there is no redress, and so that like these organizations such as Families for Justice and Healing and Unchained, that's why these organizations are of extreme importance. Because it's doing the work that needs to be done in order to kind of like not just highlight, but to help bring home those people that are encountering these degrees of injustice.
And you know, historically, attorneys, including myself, didn't really get all that involved in prison-related issues because we never got paid for them, and they can be time-consuming. Since they locked out attorneys, that's no longer the case. Certain disciplinary offenses, you can get assigned counsel now. And we have been actively working with a number of prisoners on prison reform and getting word out there and convincing people to file lawsuits, because that's considered snitching. The guards consider it snitching and you suffer the consequences. But more people are willing to step forward, in part because of some of the success that we've had, but they're tired of it. They're just tired of it. It can't go on any longer. So what I'm gonna ask both you guys, what's it like to be free?
Well, you know, getting in the car and just driving, you know, I ain't got no hair, but just let the air go through my hair, you know, watch my little sprinkles just fly away, and just, you know, being with the family and being with, you know, Patty, my son, my grandsons, you know, my father helping him around the house, and for him to say, you know, oh, well, I ain't got to do this after being, for 12 years I've been doing this, now I ain't got to do it, you know, so I'm like, that's what you use me for, you know, which is great. You know, just being able to just be free, you know, and, you know, my newfound family, you know, embrace me, Patty, Chris, Peg, Joe, Alan, and got a great job. You know, I just can't complain. I'm and now I'm doing the work on helping other guys that, you know, that's not in my situation. I mean, excuse me, that's not in my shoes now, you know, to feel how it feels to be back in society and for society to embrace them, because they really embrace me.
And how about you, Sean?
For me, it's a beautiful thing, but it's been a process. So it's I came home in 2015. Some charges were dismissed in 2018, and then ultimately in 2021, I was fully exonerated. But it was that took 6 years. And so I've kind of had to settle into like freedom. But one of the highlights of my being free is the work that I'm doing now with the Knowing Your Innocence project and the Exoneree network. And that is providing reentry support for brothers and sisters who are coming home exonerated, or those who are free but fighting still. You know, just providing support for them, but also importantly providing community support. Will spoke about programs and the importance of programs inside of prison. But I can't underscore enough the importance of community in prison. There's often time in prison that we keep one another out of trouble. Like fellow prisoners keep fellow prisoners out of trouble, because oftentimes the guards are the ones who are inciting the riots. The guards are the ones who are looking for the drama. As a matter of fact, and I know Will from inside of prison. I was involved in a situation where we was going to legal storage, and there was me and a couple of guys that we was there doing time, and we was going through a metal detector in prison, and one of the guys just started kind of antagonizing one of the prisoners, and in prison there's a culture, and you have to try to learn how to navigate it, and it's a fine line, because if you navigate it too much, then you get in trouble all the time. You don't navigate it enough, then you become a victim. So you gotta balance a fine line, and the guy was inciting the prisoner, and the prisoner was being excited, like he was looking to respond, but the response is only going to escalate it. And this particular group of people that we were with, like we wasn't looking for trouble, but at the same time, we understood the environment that we were in. So now we're trying to mediate the situation. Nothing happened, but we all ended up in the hole. Every last person ended up in the hole. And so now, part of that training that if we're not able to do that with one another in prison, when we get back out here into the world, and then we try to keep one another out of trouble out here in the world, then you're trained not to do that. And so when we speak about prison and the environment in prison and the trauma in prison, and the harm of prison, I know you asked me about being free. But this is some of the things that come with being free, though.
Well, it's the comparing what prison was like with freedom, and it, you know, I don't know personally because I've not been through it, but I do have some sense from my clients about how drastic that is. I just want to conclude by saying that you know, William is involved with Second Chance Justice, an organization that is devoted to helping other people have their sentences commuted. Sean is doing really great work with the New England Innocence Project, the Exonerate Network, which he founded, and which is funded by NEEP. And I just really commend you guys for being able to re-enter and to keep fighting for the guys that are left behind and to bring public awareness to this, because I think you're both very good ambassadors for showing what's wrong in the system. And so with that, I think we're gonna move on to questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Patty, William, and Sean. That was an amazing conversation and dialogue. Really just inspired about how you guys have lived through that and are able to even speak here in front of us today. So really appreciate that. We only have 7 minutes left for question and answer. So we're probably going to do this rapid fire or maybe just stick to one question. But I'll pass it to Lori to make that decision.
Thank you, Teresa. An amazing panel. I just am in awe of everyone. And we had a couple of questions prepared, but some of those questions actually have been answered, and so much ground to cover here. I encourage you to put whatever questions you have in the Q&A section located at the bottom. And as we kind of transition to your all questions, one of the questions that we had as a panel that that we wanted to ask is what do people do for self-care? In the past, you know, we know how difficult things can be in this particular situation, and with so many people fighting that fight every day. What do you do? You can answer by using the raise your hand feature.
So I'll just jump in. I'm sure others will have good answers as well. I just sort of wanted to point out that this whole idea of self-care and trauma from being around people who've suffered real trauma is something that the defense lawyers have been putting a lot of time and effort into in the last few years. Lawyers in general, but you know, specifically with defense lawyers, we have a huge problem of burnout. People who get into this work and then can't stay in this work for various reasons, and a lot of it has to do with their well-being. And so, you know, I don't have the lived experience, but I have the secondary trauma experience, and it's real. And I will say also that the impact of sort of that secondary trauma is certainly much more prevalent amongst the very few attorneys of color who do this work. They don't get the support that they need to do this work, and then we lose them, and then we're back, you know, into this problem. So I don't have a lot of answers, but I can tell you that it's something that I'm really committed to working on to improve for lawyers so they can be the best they can be for their clients.
Thank you, Shira. It's amazing. Any other questions, anyone?
For the self-care one, I feel like it's very hard for me because I'm a program manager. I'm only 21. I'm a full-time student, and I'm also in a sorority. So I'm like juggling so much. But one thing I feel like that I like to do self-care is I like to like do my at-home stuff. I'm really into like doing my own hair. So that's like one way I save money and just like focus on myself and like tend to myself, because as a Black woman, hair is a very big part of my identity. So I like to focus on that because I feel like that's one of the easiest things, and it's also the quickest thing to like make me feel good about myself.
I just wanted to just jump in and first I wanted to send mad love and respect to Sean and William for, you know, being vulnerable and, you know, listening to your, you know, the story of before and then being here and just sharing your expertise and coming to the table. I told you, I follow the leadership of all of my elders, including my mother, who's formerly incarcerated. My dad was formerly incarcerated. He just passed away October 3rd. And living and always being reminded of the things that happened before can just be so triggering as Black people who have transformed into different people, or just working in a transformative justice space and just walking in our truth and like life and living and growing. And so I just wanted to share love and send that to you. And also being a Black person, a Black woman in this space, it's so hard to organize and find self-healing and be a mother. But one of the things that I have started to do was write, I bought a printer, a label printer, and I put like "you are enough" all over my computer screen. So that way, when people are trying to doubt me and act like I don't know what I'm talking about, I just glance at little, positive messaging when I'm on computers, and it makes me feel good. So just wanted to send you love also, Janasia. Shout out to our elders again for creating pathways like Sisters Unchained. Andrea, founding and, being the mentorship, and also giving our elders, the space to just live is important. Andrea says that. One thing I wanted to say is that we are not free until we are all free. That's one thing. And then I also wanted to say, when people have spent decades inside of a prison or even days inside of a prison, and the harm and trauma that they come from before the incarceration and then while the incarceration, if they want to come home and hike to the Himalayas, then we need to support them hiking to the Himalayas to find the healing that they need. And so I hope that y'all are finding that healing. And I'll just close with that.
Thank you, Sashi.
Yeah.
Just such amazing information. There is so much packed into that chat. I encourage everybody to go in there and follow those links. One of the questions that we all had is what can we do going forward? There's scripts at the top of this chat. We'll try to make those available to everybody so that you can write to the governor, email the governor, call the governor, do what we can. I think we're also inspired to take action on all of this. And thank you so much to our panel. Teresa, did you want to wrap up in the last couple of minutes?
Sure. So to echo you, Lori, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved. This was an opportunity for a lot of us to listen and learn. And it's important to be able to take that time before we act, because similar to what Sashi said, we have to listen to our elders. And for me in my seat, I have to listen to people who are boots on the ground, who are doing this work every day and who are the experts. And I'm just reflecting on all of the systems. We led with a kind of chatterfall around what systemic oppression means, and folks mentioned schools and prisons, and just being in the healthcare space and thinking about a lot of folks who are in the SDOH space, so the social determinants of health space, in particular, the mental health, behavioral health space. So really thinking about how we are a part of a mosaic in a sense, and that we all have our roles in our respective fields, and it really takes really dismantling, or to some of the points of other folks, just really kicking down the system and building it up in our respective spaces to see a new vision for our future. So really want to thank everyone again for providing this space. And again, thank the planning committee for this opportunity. All of the organizations involved really prioritize equity, health equity, liberation, justice. And we really want to make sure we're not just, that it's not just us speaking about it, but we're actually putting action behind what we're talking about, and we're talking the talk and walking the walk. So thank you so much. We are at the end of time. I don't know if anyone else from the planning committee has anything else to say, but if not, I just hope everyone has a great day and can take some of the opportunities to rest and to pour back into themselves. Because it's Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Amazing, amazing. Sean,
Yeah,
William,
I think
Lisa,
everyone was amazing.
this was everything for me.
Yeah, this is amazing. I'm like fangirling over Sean and everyone.
Yes, I'm right with you.
This was a great presentation you guys put together. Thank you.